Congressman Moulton, thank you so much for your time.
It's always good to be with you.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Congressman. So just what's your reaction of the military attack on Iran?
Well, first of all, it's too early to tell exactly where this is headed, but we certainly cannot get involved in a war, another war in the Middle East. At the same time, we certainly do want to end Iran's nuclear program. We share that view with the vast majority of the world. The question really is this the best pathway to do so, not only in the short term, but in the long run? And the reason I've always been an advocate for diplomacy is because in the long run, it's the only way to keep tabs on Iran so that they not only don't have a program today, but they aren't developing one for tomorrow. So whatever's happened, we've got to get back to the negotiating table.
Yeah, when you say we just don't know, at 10 o'clock on Saturday night when Trump gave his speech, one line was, this is from his exact words, Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. I'm assuming that that's typical Trump hyperbole, that we have no idea if they were totally and completely obliterated. Am I right?
You're absolutely right, Jim. And what was even more remarkable was the Secretary of Defense's press conference the next day with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who, I mean, because Pete Hegseth was there saying the exact same thing that Trump said, it's been obliterated. And standing right next to him was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs from the military saying, we don't know. We haven't done a damage assessment yet. So to say this administration is not on the same page is an understatement. What's really going on is you've got several high officials, the president, the secretary of defense, outright lying about things that we just don't know yet.
Well, that's one of the things that I think can concern some people is a sense, many Americans may not have a lot of confidence in Pete Hegseth, given what we know about him. And the president does sometimes exaggerate. I mean, this may have been a great military triumph, as he said, but who's the grown-up in the room here? Whom can we trust?
Marjorie, that's a very important and frightening question because I don't know right now. We barely know the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He's completely unqualified, the most unqualified chairman of the Joint Chiefs in history, in fact, to occupy that position. Met none of the standard requirements for the job. And yet he seems like the most reasonable person there because at least he was speaking honestly about not even knowing the results of the operation. And then you've got Pete Hegseth in that press conference when he was pressed on the objectives, saying our objectives are very clear. It's just to destroy Iran's nuclear program. And then later that night, Trump comes out and says he wants regime change, which his own Secretary of Defense contradicted. So what's so dangerous about this situation with these characters is that they're all over the map. They don't clearly have a plan. They're not following operational security measures, so they put the troops at risk regularly. I'm told Fox News was advised of this operation before it happened, which might not be quite, I don't know how you rank that against Hegseth texting his wife or whichever wife he texted, but
it's
pretty bad. Pretty bad here.
Sorry, I shouldn't be laughing.
By the way, this has nothing to do with you, but just in this context, I hope people, when it comes to Marjorie and Congressman Moulton discussing where's the competence, ProPublica just published a piece saying that a 22-year-old guy whose resume includes grocery clerk and lawn boy is now head of a Center for Preventive Programs and Partnership in the Department of Homeland Security. That's terrorism prevention, a 22-year-old grocery clerk. Can we get back to the beginning of this thing about whether or not there was an imminent threat of them having a nuclear bomb? Everybody's heard this, but I think it's worth playing again. This is Trump on Friday. He's speaking to reporters on the tarmac at an airport in Morristown, New Jersey, and he's asked by a reporter what the basis for his intelligence is. Listen up. It's unfortunately frozen. Let me tell you what it says. The reporter says, what intelligence do you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon? Your intelligence community has said they have no evidence that they are at this point. Trump, well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that? Reporter, your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Trump looks at the reporter, says, she's wrong. So how much of a problem is it? I'm almost embarrassed to answer this question, Congressman Moulton, that the head of national intelligence for the president, who is, I think people know, had a fairly decent relationship with the former head of Syria, is totally not trusted or respected by the president of the United States.
Well, she doesn't seem to be trusted or respected by just about anyone, but it's a big problem if the president doesn't trust his own director of national intelligence. There's no question,
Eh,
because you can't make decisions if you can't agree on the facts. And one of the biggest questions I'll be asking as soon as I get into a classified room this week down in Washington, I'm heading there this afternoon, is what exactly was the intelligence? Because the last briefing I got was the same thing that we've heard from Tulsi Gabbard, which is that yes, they are getting close, but they have not actually started to weaponize. And frankly, they've been very close to producing a nuclear bomb ever since Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah.
I want to get to the what would have happened. I know it's hypothetical if he hadn't backed out of the Obama deal for a second. But is it possible, even if there was not an imminent threat, that in light of the fact that Israel obviously weakened their missile defense system, I guess their offensive missile system as well, is it possible that even if there wasn't an imminent threat, that this may turn out to have been the right thing to do by the United States, if in fact there is anything close to obliteration, Congressman?
I don't think anybody wants to hear that, but yes, Jim, it's actually a very important question. And every single day that I was a Marine serving on the ground in Iraq, disagreeing with the war, having voted against George Bush, who started the war twice, the question was not relitigating should we go to Iraq. The question every single day was what do we do now? What do we do
Yeah.
next? And that is always the most important question in these national security situations because the enemy gets a vote. Sometimes your allies get a vote that you may not have even supported, but you have to act on the situation as it is. And let's be clear, first principles here, we absolutely do not want Iran, a country that hangs people in the street for being gay, a country that has declared death to Israel, death to America enough times that we ought to believe it by now. We do not want them to have a nuclear weapon. But as I've always said again, it's not just a question of whether they have one tomorrow on Tuesday. It's a question of whether they're rebuilding a program and whether they will have one next week. Whether they decide, you know what, this hasn't worked out for us, so we're just going to go buy one from North Korea. And how do we prevent that from happening? So there are a lot of questions that have to be answered and are most effectively answered going forward by actually having a diplomatic agreement that allows intrusive inspections like we had on the Iran nuclear deal. And by the way, the Iran nuclear deal under Obama was an imperfect deal. I criticized many elements of that deal, but I also supported it because it prevented Iran from getting as close to Obama as they have been, and they were up until at least a few days ago. And it provided inspections that, by the way, all of our intelligence said Iran was abiding by the deal when we had those intrusive inspections. That's ultimately what Trump wants to get back to. He ultimately wants to get back to the same deal he pulled out of. But my point is that's the only way to ensure for the long term that Iran doesn't develop a nuclear bomb.
So that
Yeah.
little history for a second. So I'm Donald Trump. I get out of an agreement that was limiting enrichment. And because I got out of the agreement and they're able to enhance their enrichment, I now have to bomb their facilities because of their enhanced enrichment. Is that as convoluted as that is? That is a fair
And
description of
then
the
he'll
history,
go
isn't it?
back to the Obama deal
Deal
and
right,
declare
exactly.
victory.
That's basically what's happened. Now, critics of the Iran deal will say, well, look, it was going to always come to this point because the deal had sunsets and, you know, it wasn't enforceable beyond a certain timeline and whatnot. But that's assuming that you wouldn't negotiate further deals. In my experience, once you open the path to negotiation, you usually have more deals, right? There are a lot of nuclear weapons deals with the Soviet Union after we got one. And so the path forward from the JCPOA would have been to say, okay, we've got this part done. Now let's talk about how we get to the next stage, to extend the deal, to limit enrichment further, to limit your production of ballistic missiles. We might have a lot fewer drones and ballistic missiles in Ukraine today if we had stayed in the Iran nuclear deal and found a way to further limit Iranian production of those weapons. The point is that the path to diplomacy isn't a one-stop path. It's a multi-stop path, and you have to keep working at it. We're now starting literally from ground zero. It's hard to imagine why the Iranians would negotiate with Trump now, someone who pulled out of a deal they made first, then said he wanted peace again, then supported Israel bombing them, then bombed them themselves when he said he wanted to come back to the negotiating table. This is the pickle that we're in right now, is that we still need to get back to the table. And the question is, what is the strategy for doing so? We haven't heard that from the administration.
Well, I think, as a lot of people would say at this point, why is Iran going to trust the Trump administration? But I do want to bring up something, though. You were in Iraq. You're a Marine. I think the one thing that was we don't know how much of a success in terms of getting rid of their nuclear capabilities, but certainly to someone, a citizen like myself, a non-military person like myself, those stealth bombers coming out of Missouri, 18 hours over, 18 hours back, refueling on the way, two people in those jets, dropping the enormous bombs with a decoy before that. I mean, as a Marine, I mean, this is pretty impressive militarily.
It's very impressive militarily. And I want to go back to the press conference yesterday with the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, because even though the chairman might be the most unqualified chairman in
Oh
history,
God.
it was interesting to listen to him continually praise the troops
Yeah.
because it was a remarkable operation that was risky, that was dangerous, and I don't want to take anything away from the heroism of those pilots and so many other people, even the cyber warriors who just cleared the path for this to happen, for it to be a successful operation. Now, contrast that with the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, standing next to him. His only praise was for Donald Trump. Every
Right.
other word was, oh my gosh, what an amazing leader this Donald Trump is, which just proves what a sycophant Pete Hegseth is, even though they can't even get on the same page about whether they're advocating for regime change. But that's the point is now the military has done its job. We'll have to assess in the coming days exactly how successful it was. But ultimately and quickly, we have got to get back to a place where we have intrusive inspections in Iran to prevent them from ever developing a nuclear bomb in the future. That's the way to keep us safe, to keep Israel safe, and also, by the way, to keep all our other allies in the Middle East safe so that they don't start getting their own nuclear bombs and set off a nuclear arms race in one of the most volatile parts of the world.
Congressman, this is a uninformed civilian's question, but how do these pilots stay awake 36 hours in a row? That's a long time without sleep.
Well, I don't know all the details, but something you might have been familiar with back in the 60s or 70s, Marjorie.
A little White Cross, a little speed.
Okay, fine. Hey, Congressman Moulton, what's the retaliation from the Iranians you most fear, and what do you think is most likely?
Actually, the retaliation I most fear is something asymmetric. We know that they're trying to assassinate targets here in the United States. I had dinner with one of their assassination targets on Thursday night. We know that they are trying to, they have the potential to create mass casualty events. There have already been warnings issued by subway systems. Airports are on high alert. There's a lot of concern for our infrastructure. There are things that they could do through cyber. And of course, they have allies. One of the things that happens when you attack a country like this is it starts looking around for who its allies are. And we don't want to drive them closer together. Like I said, they might be in the market for buying a nuclear bomb, and we've got to make sure that doesn't happen.
You know, there's been a lot of reporting about the nuclear materials having been moved. There were trucks seen around these sites, and I don't really understand how they move uranium, but that may have undercut our effectiveness, if that's true.
It's true. It also raises an important question, Marjorie, about whether there is any fallout from these attacks,
Yeah.
whether there's any radioactive fallout from these attacks that could be spreading across the Middle East. That, of course, would be a diplomatic disaster, not to mention a humanitarian disaster if it were to happen. So there are a lot of unanswered questions here. But I want to bring us back to the core principles. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. We have to now make decisions going forward about how we get back to the table to ensure that's the case in the long term, not just the short term. And this administration has got to get itself straight on what the hell they're advocating for. Are they advocating for regime change or not? Are they going to just follow Israel through on their policy, or are they going to actually have their own? about what's going to go forward with Iran. These are a lot of unanswered questions that keep us in a very dangerous position. And in Congress, we have a critical responsibility to actually have this debate about whether these actions were constitutional. And there is a debate there. There's a debate to be had. There are arguments, legal arguments on both sides, but it's going to be an abrogation of our constitutional duties in Congress if we don't have that serious debate and make it clear what the president did that was legal and what was illegal, so we correct this going forward the next time something like this happens.
You know, last thing for me, Congressman Moulton, is exactly what you're touching about, the War Powers Act of, I think, 1973. I mean, the reality is virtually every president ignores the obligations to notify and involve Congress. That's a fair statement, isn't there?
It is on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, I know.
Obama was accused of this.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's fair.
So
It's fair.
at minimum, it seems to me that there should be at least some notification. And from what I've heard and what I've read is Donald Trump, in sort of typical fashion, broke with endless tradition. And the only people he notified in Congress that this was going to happen were fellow Republicans. Is that true as far as you know? And how big a deal is that if that's true?
I think it's one of Trump's earlier secretaries of defense, General Mattis, who said that he is the most partisan, polarizing president in history, the most divisive president in history, I think were the secretary's words. And the fact that even for matters of national security, when lives are on the line, Trump takes a totally partisan approach here, only notifying Republicans. And I'm told, even tipping off Fox News in advance
know,
of this
incredible.
operation, clearly violating basic rules for operational security, just like Hegseth did with his signal
Do you
chat.
mean because he's got to notify MSNBC and Fox
Yeah.
News? Is that your
Yeah.
position,
It
Congressman?
is absolutely not my position.
You know,
Because pilots' lives are on the line here.
Of course.
And you don't trust news organizations, no matter who they are, to keep top secret information safe. And the fact that this administration plays so willfully with the lives of our troops. I'm not just talking about the disparaging comments Trump has made about how we're suckers and losers for
Yeah.
signing up and getting shot and killed, and John McCain should never gotten captured. Just his complete disregard for the safety of our heroic pilots and other troops who participated in this operation by letting this intelligence out early and in a partisan way. We're going to have to dig into this too.
Congressman, I know we're almost out of time, but one more quick thing from me. There's another theory that, Netanyahu did these strikes against Iran, the Israelis military did the strikes against Iran, and they were deemed as a wonderful success, and that then Trump kind of did a flip-flop and decided he kind of wanted to be in on the action.
Because he saw them on Fox News.
Yes, and Netanyahu is I think one of the main people that's been saying over and over again, they're about to get a bomb, they're about to get a bomb. So did Trump do this in part because Netanyahu was on his back, or because he wanted to get in on the action that he saw got received so well with the Israeli strikes? Does that have any credibility?
I mean, we don't know yet, but we do know a couple of things that we've established in this discussion this morning. One, that Trump listens to Fox News,
Yeah.
and two, that Trump does not listen to his director of national intelligence. So what does that tell you?
Seth Moulton, last thing from me, if I can here. We're talking to Congressman Seth. Actually, it's going to take too long, so let's pass on this. Congressman, we really appreciate your thoughts and hope to speak to you again soon. Thanks so much for your time.
All right, always good to be with you.